Hello, everyone. Welcome to our ASQ Innovation TC December meeting, the last of our season, and we are so wonderfully grateful for our wonderful speaker, the awesome Mr. Dan Z, who is a project manager at RST Instruments. His background is phenomenal, based in British Columbia. He has international experience in both quality and project management. He is an ASQ fellow and has been awarded multiple medals. He's certified within ASQ in multiple certifications and is an auditor, has a PMP, and holds his Scrum Master designation. You are in for a treat because not only is he a phenomenal content delivery person, both across all of these spectrums, he is also an author, a reviewer, and a committee chair for our ASQ Edwards Medal. And of course, remains active with our quality management division as a member leader. So we welcome the awesome Dan Z, and I will share, before I turn it over to him, I will share one fun fact with you tonight that you cannot read in his bio. And that you are in for a treat tonight because he is going to use all of his experience and his interest in both religious and spiritual studies. He has researched presentations and topics such as the wisdom of literature and the origins and celebrations of Epiphany. So I think all of that will add up to a phenomenal innovation experience for you as you reach for your own respective epiphanies. The awesome Mr. Dan Z, I am passing control over to you now.
Well, thank you. I will share my screen and open up the presentation and let's see. Can you see the title page?
Perfect.
Okay, and let me just say it is truly a highlight of my year to have such an introduction by the eminent and illustrious Dr. Rhonda Farrell, and truly it itself is an epiphany. Rhonda, do you like wine?
I do.
Do you like cake?
I don't eat cake so much. I don't drink too much wine anymore either. But I do admire the fortitude and the effort it takes to create both of those perfect things.
Well, because both of those are parts in different parts of the world characteristic of Epiphany celebrations. So, and you know, that is quite remarkable to learn different things of how, to me, it's an underrated holiday. It's overwhelmed by Christmas and it comes so quickly after. And, you know, for innovation, it's about discovery, which is another word for Epiphany. So it's, you know, it's a good thing to find it. So spiritual, really, it's about another way to describe it as holistic. Ikigai appeals to me personally. I'm not presenting this as any sort of an expert or a lecturer. This is something that I've taken a personal interest in, and I've presented it in another context that we co-presented, and so from that, this opportunity came. And I hope that in sharing this, I can do so as a catalyst to help not only promote Ikigai as a method or a structure, but also help to drive out those particular innovations that are, you know, have appeal in different ways. So this is the Ikigai that, just to elaborate, what does the person love? What does the world need? So what's essential? What is the person good at? And that can be either you or someone else. And then what can be paid for? So putting that in, I guess, tangible terms, love can be in many forms. And that's also something I've researched, is different forms of love. So C.S. Lewis is a very good author who broke that down in very good categories. But coming back to when someone someone has an interest or curiosity, that's what stimulates further exploration. And through that exploration, that's where you make those new discoveries, or alternatively identify things that have not previously been considered. So that's where the passion comes from to really drive what what is. And you can see in the Ikigai too, I will revert back to the larger view. There are interactions because it is a combined series of diagrams. Passion is the integration of what you love and what you're good at, and that's something that promotes activity. What you love and what the world needs, well, that's mission, and something that you're willing to do through to its completion, far beyond just putting in a day's work. And then also the distinction between whether it's profession or vocation, and coming in as a quality, that ultimately both quality is both professional and vocational, and hopefully you're paid for what you do, but that comes down to professionally with being a specialist, but vocationally delivering to fulfill something greater. And both of those are essential. And the integration of passion, mission, profession, vocation ultimately get us to our purpose of that the Japanese call it Ikigai. So in the same way, I've looked at innovation and tried to create a structure which also helps us get to that central point of innovation that combines similar themes. Although in the context of innovation, I've used substitutes for what you love, what you're good at, and I'll just describe this very quickly. So in the position of what the person loves, I've termed this as user satisfaction and delight. So that is something that when you're doing something for someone, whether it's individual or a range of things, this is something that's very important to understand, why it's building that emotional connection, why they like it or why they dislike it, and then so coming at innovation in two ways, either to make it grow or to offset the things that are blocking the user frustration. As well, what does the world need? Well, this is, I thought that having awareness and knowledge, what does the world need? That is actually a question of empathy. And in terms of, in order to know that, you have to first understand the perspective of who you're studying or who you're trying to get a better understanding. What does the world is very broad, so you might want to refine to specific groups or specific people, targets. In any case, it's all about learning what is important, and then understanding the limitations that are blocking what's important. What's the person good at? I've took that as technological advancements. We can go any number of ways. For the scope of this very brief presentation, I use technology because that is something that we can track the advancements. We can track between software, devices, capabilities, networks, and infrastructure. These things which are opening up new possibilities and capabilities, how can these be applied? And having an understanding of those, that will be, that's something that we can apply to the other areas. And finally, the bottom, it's the bottom of the diagram, also the bottom line, is how do we get benefits, or more importantly, how do we stop the losses? And that's where innovation, how we determine is it worthwhile. You can have emotional and knowledge growth, but ultimately when you look at how are you spending your time, and especially when time is scarce, your financial things are scarce, this is where you have to evaluate, is this innovation worthwhile? So coming to this, driving innovation, we have to start from our current baseline. So really it's about movement. And at the start of this presentation, Rhonda asked, what is a question that I would pose? And I think it's not on here, but what is a meaningful innovation? And in order to be meaningful, it has to be relative based on what's your current baseline, what are your experiences today, and then from that point, you can look at it in two ways. What problems are solved and what new solutions are available. And this can be across each of these. It is something to consider, and I think if you take a moment to understand that you may have heard the term first world problems. This is really about things are already pretty good. They're already we have many conveniences, so it's not a misfortune. For example, if you're using an online device and it makes you wait 5 minutes so that you can finish your food order, compared to your grandparents who had to walk uphill both ways 20 miles just to get a bag of flour to bring back home so they could make bread from scratch. So it's understanding that the current baseline is different for different people. So then the innovation that I've highlighted is the incremental distance between where you are and what your new state is. Before I proceed, is there anyone that has a different view or an alternate view of what innovation represents?
We're not seeing something in the chat, but I think one of the ways we've talked about that, Dan, is to your point, right? Problems being solved or new solutions being created. It's really all about the value add, right? That is flowing to the organization, to the team, to the community, and to the customer.
That's a very good, and again, that's a tangible bottom line perspective. Is, you know, what does this objectively result in? Thank you. Okay, I've split this, you know, coming into the whole spiritual thing, you know, virtuous and vicious, and you may have heard the term vicious cycle. So we'll start with what are the positives, and you know, with user satisfaction, this touches on that whatever's changed has an emotional, it makes you feel better, or in other ways, it gives you peace of mind. It gives you a sense, you hear terms like that warm and fuzzy feeling. That is something that may not necessarily be objectively measurable, but you'll know it when you have it. It's like, you know, and it could be, for example, when they talk about medicine, if a doctor has what's called a bedside manner, there's nothing that's really specific or tangible. It's just if they take the extra time to calmly give assurance about that they understand your condition and they understand a workable treatment plan, the patient will feel better, and that itself will help with the healing process. So awareness and knowledge, gaining new understanding and capabilities, so that really that comes back to growth. And you know, as with awareness comes a higher level of sophistication. So as people, you know, in quality, we have what are called maturity models, so that as you advance along those maturity models, the range of what you're doing is the tasks and activities and priorities change because of the higher level of sophistication that everyone at that point should encounter. You're past the point of baby steps. You're doing, you know, more advanced interactions. The technological advancement, and I've just highlighted what's changed. And you imagine even in the last 7 to 10 years, the software, devices, infrastructure, and the time flies. I look at my own iPhone 8, which you know, it's 2022, so really it's a 5-year-old. Or I acquired it 5 years ago, but compared to what's available now, it seems like a brick that lights up compared to the, you know, robust technology. It still functions, and I use it, but by having those advances currently, that could open up increased capabilities. Like my son took a flight today, and he's able to do a lot of the interactions using his mobile phone. So having that is, makes international travel much better. So, and finally, again, the transactional and looking at return on investment in terms of what we do for cost, time, and effort, and the value for time, effort, and materials applied. So that aligns with what was just mentioned about how innovation is tracked, that what value is added. Now this is also something, I did not get this from any external source. This is really, I wanted to replicate the interactions that the Ikigai had with the whole passion, mission, profession, vocation. And, so these interactions, I'll start from the top, the flash, like when you combine the user delight, with an awareness, and a flash, this another term for epiphany, just something that, aha, now I understand. And it's by having that understanding, then a problem is solved. And now I know why, for example, it could be even, gee, my car's not running very well. Oh, I'll disengage the parking brake. Ah, now much better. Now I know to make sure that the parking brake's off before I move into drive. So revelation, and this is something that, increased advantage. So having the awareness and how that can, give you some sort of a advantage of a time saving or cost. And one example, if any of you use Microsoft Excel, and especially when you have recurring reports, and then you create a macro so that all of a sudden what tended to take 5 to 10 minutes every day can, at the press of a button, be done within seconds. And you're like, oh, this is, or, something like setting up a pivot table. Oh, this makes analysis much easier and quicker, and it's dynamic. So that saves, extra work that you have to do on top of your day job. The wizard, and I thought of the wizard in two contexts. One is in a computer use, the wizard is often an application or a subset that helps a user get through a particular difficulty, that whether it automates it or provides the guidance. And then as a personally, when you have that capability, combining the technology and the user delight, and I imagine with my offspring, they can do crazy stuff with their different devices. All of a sudden we're watching stuff on TV that was on their phones, and we're watching a streamed hockey game that and they had access to their phone, so it's pretty good. And by them having that capability, they all of a sudden there's a shift in their their stature. They're the ones who a relative in the household are the geniuses. It's like 30 years ago, the person who knew how to program the VCR had that capability. So it supports and it increases independence and discretion as well. So as you become more of a wizard, you get the confidence to try new things, use it in other ways and in other contexts. So that helps with pursuing innovation. And finally, the upgrade. So how does that advancement, if that realize you get a benefit of time, or if you get a benefit of cost, especially if there's a premium attached to it, that makes can make a world of difference. A good example would be if you know better methods of data visualization, so you have the same data while other people are still showing two-dimensional charts. If you can use advanced data visualization techniques to have dynamically displayed and projected and extrapolated data, then that makes it more suitable for business decision applications. So these are things, and in a situation, I'll open it up to as well. There's other things, but online financial planning, and this is in the context of a household, where especially if you've got multiple earners, multiple spenders, and multiple parts to the household, it's there are different ways this can be applied. So the example of a flash, the term gamification to show trends and induce habits. So if you want to induce saving, or saving towards something, or investing, this is one principle is set aside 10% of your income or 20%. And as you do that, by the time you do that for your 5th paycheck in a row, then have like a small reward to say, hey, you did it, you're a saver, you're a super saver, or something that other things like leaderboards, you say who's done the best recycling. So awareness and transactions, so small changes towards outcomes. And for those of you who may have mortgages, often mortgages have fixed terms, but they have a way that if you pay principal, portion of principal in advance, you can pay it down more quickly, and especially showing that by doing so, you save the amount of interest, and especially in the first couple of years, almost your full mortgage payments is interest, the high percentage of interest. So once you realize that, you realize, okay, if I can pay it down early in the mortgage, that will save years of interest, and I'll have that money, or more importantly, I won't have that mortgage. I can devote myself to other things. To be a wizard, so I use the example to invest and trade independently without brokers. First of all, you can make decisions quickly without waiting for your broker to get back from lunch or the 3 martinis or whatever they do. Doing things at the time as needed, and doing things at a lower commission. And the other thing, updating wills and estates dynamically, especially as your household gets more complex. People are coming in, going out. It's or if you make if you're a modest household, this is not a big deal. It's like who gets the who gets the pennies in the jar. But if you're dealing with some things that let's say you have 3 kids and 1 lake house, who gets the lake house when you're gone? It's if you have a wizard, this is something that can be done as the situation requires, and using the technology to make sure that it's legally sound. And of course, technology and transactions. One thing in my work environment, we are doing constantly projects with other countries where there's ratings, so then we have to report in our currency. So what does that mean for, and that could even be the difference if you're getting supplies and they're offered from different parts of the world. Understanding the currencies is also part of the decision process. So, it's by having the technology, you can make these real-time decisions. I'm going to open it up. Is there anywhere else that any other situations where some of these things like flashes and wizards can be constructive toward finding innovations?
I am not seeing that there's information in the chat, but I think, Dan, that they're using this type of tool and approach. We're seeing a lot of organizations, especially around small and medium-sized businesses, as well as technology transfer agencies, partnering with academia and partnering with commercial firms to do exactly this, right? Uncover that value-laden service or product offering that's really going to help accelerate the technology transfer.
That's a very big, technology transfer and transformations are have been very big themes over the last 2-3 years. And anything that can help get to that new state is always going to be very good. So along with this, I've got where I termed vicious or negative, and using the context of the vicious cycle, is that another purpose of innovation is to not just pursue utopia, but to stop things that are creating distress, and looking at what are the antonyms of these items. So if someone has user dissatisfaction and frustration, that can also be emotionally where you just don't want to deal with it anymore. And it in itself, the very idea of having to do it becomes a source of distress. So it has to be overcome. Things like ambiguity and confusion, and this is where there's different terms that are applied and have different meanings. Even something as simple as, from a project management perspective, is the project done? That creates ambiguity because there's a whole line of thinking called definition of done, where you have to clearly specify this is the line, this is where we stop. So otherwise it becomes almost a perpetual thing. Or confusion. When there is confusion, then that's the opposite of alignment. So technological limitations, and in some cases this is just whether you don't have the devices or the networks, or and then some of the things that can offset that is what can you standardize, what can you simplify, and then the next stage is automating whatever's been standardized. So that's actually a project that I've done previously, is looking at in the case of contracts, first of all, aligning so that the contracts are written the same, so that it, it's not, if you ever, companies are very good about, yes, it's in the contract, but they put it in very difficult things to find. They call it fine print. So having the expected information at the expected location within a contract, that's something that is helpful to overcome that. And then it's easier to quickly scan and automate. So, and finally, the transactional losses, and this opens up a large part of what the quality profession does in other contexts, is to find where's the non-value added portion and where can these wastes be removed. So and coming to that as well, it's using the same way for the flash. Instead of the flash being something that's eureka, it's like, oh, it's relief. It's it's the distress is brought down a level, and then so you're almost walking them back from the ledge. The revelation is more that I associate that in this context with smacking your forehead. It's like, oh, I can't believe I've been doing this the wrong way for so long. So then you learn, well, this can stop things and be helpful. Leveraging existing technological solutions, so benchmarking, so doing something that may not have traditionally been done, and often it's applying, for example, business to business and business to customer are different transaction styles, but there are a lot of, because business to customer has a lot of visibility, where business to business often you have the same, it's people renewing the same routine order. It's not as developed. So a lot of innovations that are done for business to customer can be leveraged and successfully applied in business to business context with very successful results. And I'll come to that example in a minute. And finally, with the technology and transactions, you can look at what are the KPIs, and how do you know if it's being successful. And one, as I wrote this, one example that I've used in the past was for deliveries on time in full. It seems very basic that if you have a delivery any type, of course it's going to be on time and in full. That's what you're paying for. But this is almost like an actual current, especially with the supply chain issues now, having on time and full shipments is more of an exception than a regular occurrence. So that's actually looking at the supply chain management as an example of how this can be done to have more innovation. So to get more user delight, first of all, clarifying what are the terms, what is the what is the order, what's the delivery, what's the definition of done, and having the alignment then reduces the disappointment, because in some cases, disappointment comes from unmet expectations that stem from assumptions or, overpromise between the sales and marketing side and the delivery side, so the execution side. I'm just thinking of it now, but there's a famous image of the swing where it's like what the customer wants is basically a swing hanging from a tree branch on a rope, and there's about 6 different iterations, and by the time they got something, it's like something way different than what the customer wanted all along. So the revelation, it's showing how much in your current state, how much is being lost and what you can do to offset those losses. And this is something that is being actively done by standardizing. And this goes back to actually Henry Ford. The way he built his cars is using standard reusable parts. We're revisiting that, but he had some very good people working for him that convinced him that was the way to go for mass production. So by using a standardized option that can save the purchase, not just save the price, but it's also supply chain is about, can you deliver, what are the lead times, and it's a shorter lead time if you're using a standard option as well, so that gets a benefit from a transactional perspective. User delight, in the example for supply chain, having individual user portals for recurring orders. This way the person making the order can automatically regenerate their stock and have it ongoing. It doesn't have to go through a salesman, a quotation. It's simply catalog commodity. If there are additional services needed, that can be applied as well. And this is the basis of the whole ERP, MRP industry, is how do you track that end-to-end workflow across functions so that the same information as it goes through inventory, purchasing, receiving, and accounting, making sure that that is common and consistent, and that you end up with what you started. This, by having under the wizard capability, this then by having these processes stabilized, that allows for expansion or extension following, and that's where innovation can come in too. Is you're managing this innovation, can be doing something at scale or doing something in a new perspective. So moving from a stable state to something that's represents growth or new capabilities. And finally, with technology, we get the mobile IoT. So by having algorithms, these are things which can prevent stockouts, which in turn cascade into other supply chain issues. So now we can't, there are bigger issues that are causing the supply chain. There's global conflicts, there's resource depletion, and those are issues which are being managed with, very carefully. Hence the need for innovation. When you're confronted with something out of your control, what are your alternatives? And then using this to explore alternatives. So I've got this, I'll open it up. Are there any other examples of how this can be used to overcome problems that are encountered in a particular area?
Still seeing none, but I love your supply chain management example and really all of the work that's being done within cyber there, right? So talk about user delight and awareness, transactional, everything around integrity. I think there's lots of opportunities there, Dan.
Well, thank you. Okay. Again, this is my own innovation is I pretty much stick to the same PowerPoint smart art. I can innovate myself better, but I found this having a foundational step-by-step approach is really about building from the long term. So starting with the user satisfaction delight, this should really be the first visible signal. Are you on the right track? If the users are encouraging, if they're lining up at your door, then that's a positive. Like lining up positively, that's a positive indicator. If on the other hand, if they're lining up with torches and pitchforks ready to throw you over or throw you over the deck into the water. If they're not satisfied, then that's a sign that there has to be some change made. So reducing the frustration and increasing the delight and passion, and both directions, it can be very contagious, and it's important to manage. The awareness and knowledge, this is user sophistication and robustness. Also, one measure is that when the users themselves have enthusiastic communities. My son is an avid Lego enthusiast, and there's no shortage of Lego worldwide that people get interested. They have conferences, they have competitions. There's now a TV show called Lego Masters. So when something is to the extent that you have the enthusiastic community, that's also a source of innovation, because they're the ones who are the most passionate about it and contribute ideas. So tapping into that is also a good source of innovation. The technological advancements, this is something that, for example, just giving this presentation online from the comfort of my home to you, that represents, network advancement of infrastructure, devices, and it provides me with a personal opportunity to interact and engage with people from all multiple geographic areas that I wouldn't otherwise have the chance. So it is especially proven its worth when we've had pandemics and travel restrictions. So this is, now in doing that, we can see now that we have this capability, how can we expand on it and really use it as a catalyst for other changes. And then coming back, when you've got the satisfied people, they're sophisticated, they've got the tools at their disposal. Now, how do you realize the value? I don't want to say monetize. There's other ways to get that value. How to get something tangible that can represent that it was worthwhile. And it's I've got this in a foundation, but it's cyclical too. If you reach a point and you're not satisfied, then go back to. So you go back to the transactional and you say, yeah, they seem okay, but we're not doing enough. Is there some premium that we can offer that would really excite them? And that's always a way to revisit. We're good. Can we be better? Can we maximize and optimize? And that's where the innovation outcomes. The last point I've got on that, there's no dependencies on the silver bullet solution. It's not just one thing. It's actually multiple, a convergence of multiple virtuous and positive contributors that lead to a very good outcome. So, and speaking of contributors, this is something that the eminent and illustrious Dr. Rhonda suggested that I do, is a parting call to action. And I think the parting call is seeing this, drawn from the Ikigai itself, which is used in many respects for finding your purpose, applying that to innovation. You won't, change the world tomorrow, but you can take constructive steps. So what can be done today? And if someone's upset, what can be overcome to relieve their frustration and user dissatisfaction? What does the world need? And you don't have to solve all the world's problems all at once. What's an initial? It snowed here yesterday. My neighbor needed the walk cleaned. I crossed the street and helped her clean it. So it's just having a mindset of what can I do. It's a part of it is empathy, part of it is service, but it's also in doing that, what lessons can be learned for, how I've done this now individually, what can be done to scale, or what can be done, at volume or with automation or propagated. So it's, but it all starts from a single step. What is the person good at? And technological advancement is only one of many things that are available, but it's like, what is accessible now? And here's a hack, whatever you want to call it. I have a library card often people just think, oh, library card, I'll go take out books. And that's a very good benefit because it's cheaper to take out a library book than to purchase it for $30. But in my community, the library card also gives me the option for online learning. Things like it has an account with LinkedIn, so I could get the LinkedIn learning, online books like O'Reilly's publications. So I think if nothing else, explore what your local library has with a card and what the online benefits are, and see what you can yield and harvest just from something that you may already have, and then go through other things. What are your benefits? I belong to the local YMCA and I use their gym capabilities, but I know that there are far more programs for myself and my family that are offered. So, I guess what's a person good at? Understanding what is at your disposal now and what can be used, effectively to help you. And finally, what can the person be paid for? One thing to step back, like transactional, quick wins or losses, looking at the context, for example, for food. If you make stuff yourself, and I joked about, oh, your grandparents walked uphill both ways to get a bag of flour, but if you can deconstruct what you buy at a restaurant and say, can I replicate this? So first of all, you have a challenge, and when you accomplish it, you get that, and then you realize, okay, this is how it's constructed. What can I do? What can I do to modify it? So and innovation is a mindset really of taking something you have and what are some additional things or what are some revisions. Sometimes if you're not a very good cook, you make mistakes and you have to recover. I will give one of my hacks. I made hollandaise sauce, but I overcooked it and it separated. Well, what am I going to do? So I threw in some ice cubes. Sure enough, the ice cubes cooled it enough that it became viscous again, and it was edible. So there's always innovation is not just in making something new, but also a form of troubleshooting. So with that, I'll open up for questions, comments, or feedback.
I'm putting it in the chat again for you, Dan, and while we're waiting for people to offer that, first off, I just want to say thank you so very much. There is so much wrapped up into this presentation, Dan, and I'd like you to, maybe if you could pull a few threads, right? We hear there's a people aspect, there's a process aspect, there's a technology aspect, but so much of it seems so powerful in the cultural areas, the leadership areas, the workforce or staff areas. Could you share with us a little bit about maybe your experience harnessing this model or this methodology to really drive some culture changes?
Oh, I have a very modest background. One thing that I found very influential is the idea of psychological safety. I was fortunate to work for a place where the CEO promoted a book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyne, and it's like a three-part or three-stage process where the first stage, create an environment of psychological safety where people feel safe that if they say something or do something, it won't be, have anyone come down on them, that it's, they're not always on the defensive. And the analogy was that others can be a guide dog versus a guard dog. So it's a very good environment where there's common assistance and support. And then the second thing is what's termed shared vulnerability, where if you have a problem, you have the ability to disclose that, and knowing that other people often are encountering the same struggle. And this can be whether it's a personal struggle or a challenge. And then by being in that environment, you either work to overcome that challenge or you have some way to accommodate it. It's something that you don't have to put up a false front and give misleading misinformation. So with those foundation, then it becomes a purpose-driven organization. So innovation, I think, works best when there's a clear purpose to that organization, and that drives innovation in order to achieve that purpose. If your purpose, for example, is providing healthcare, then if that's the target, then you're looking for innovations that you get to a point, you realize there's a blockage, there's an obstacle that has to be surmounted, there are limitations. So then that opens up the need for innovation to either work through it, work around it, find alternatives that'll ultimately get you to that point.
I love it, because you're right. I mean, that in and of itself, right? The clarity on the mission, the clarity on the vision, the clarity on the goals, the clarity on the way forward. You're right. It creates the momentum, which opens up the aperture to build that psychological safety, that trusted space, right? That focus on informed risk taking that really enables innovation. Could you talk, you talked about products and or services, automations, and efficiencies. When we look at the core model components and what helps innovation thrive, how do you, how are you teaching or sharing this model with your teams so that they can move through that psychological safety, building trust, and really open up the aperture for innovation? What have you seen that's really kind of best practices there?
I work in a very technologically savvy organization, and the drivers of innovation are actually the younger generation. And it's because, in one sense, they don't know that they can't do it. So overcoming fear, overcoming doubt, I think is very critical to successful innovation. And there's a domino effect. There's a momentum that happens when often it's the same person who innovated in one field is called upon to look at something else, and then they deliberate, they look at the situation, they come back with a solution. So and I think to lead in such an organization, you have to humble yourself, not in a negative way, but in a way that if someone is maybe junior in the organizational hierarchy, but they may very well have capabilities and you should be humble enough to accept and be receptive to their capabilities. And that's where it comes back to being psychologically safe and giving them the ability that they can come forward. If something is not right, then you can work with them to fix it, or alternatively, if they have a better way of doing something, indulging them and seeing how it materializes.
Thank you. I love your flow of your conversation earlier, really about the value. What problems are solved and what new solutions can potentially be created? Could you share with us maybe a best practice of how you've harnessed this methodology or this framework to really help a client or a customer or a community organization move through this, right? This user satisfaction and delight, awareness and knowledge. What's the opportunity space with regard to advancements to really focus on fleshing out, helping teams and leaders and organizational units get to how problems can be solved or new solutions can be created through the use of this?
I'll draw from a project that I had the opportunity to lead several years ago. It was in a procurement, trying to find efficiencies in a procurement function. And one of the first stages was the supplier contracts. And this was the company would, for the most part, try to use their standard method, but they used what was called vendor paper. So the terms and conditions that the vendors would use would sometimes create ambiguity and a source of contradiction. There's also the scope of this created misalignment because there would be a global agreement, which would have one set of terms and conditions, and then local quotations, local transactions, which were done without referencing this global agreement. So then as a result, the company was overpaying on things. So it became evident that the standardization of vendor contracts were very important, so that first of all, the terms and conditions were understood, and then that those very terms were clear. In some cases, some of the discounts or promotions were time-based, so understanding when they would have to be renewed, or or in turn, if the vendor charged the full rate when there is a still prevailing discount, when that would have to be activated. So the innovation was, and the credit goes to the legal team of the organization I was with. They looked at what are the key components that have to be in place and mapped out what should be in a vendor agreement, and said this is the standard, and really push that if you want to do business with our organization, this is the agreement template that has to be followed. And then based on that template, that made it easier to the automation of extracting that and having it available in the purchasing system, that itself. So coming back, the user delight contracts was a source of distress, so that by simplifying, standardizing, and automating it, that reduced the distress. Say, okay, it's just something that we have to do, and actually people got excited about wanting to manage that effectively to their advantage and find those discounts, rather than, oh, I don't want to look through tons of paper. It takes person 8 hours to, they're imagining when it was manual versus automated, the time saved, and not just the time, but the sophistication of the resource that had to be used for it. So making things simpler, that means that you can use, I don't want to say a lower person, but a more novice person for the routine work, and delegate the more complex work to the skilled resource. So where did that get us to? That got us to that with the information, and that created accuracy in purchasing, and then that makes it easier to reconcile between what was purchased, what was quoted, and what was delivered. So that when the accounting is seeing, we negotiated a 20% discount, but we didn't get this 20% discount, and that creates a reconciliation problem. So that's why I use the supply chain as an overall example, because it's rife with problems. And for context, my time in supply chain was well before the whole COVID thing. So I know that the COVID and the pandemic introduced far more issues, depletion of materials. So because now there are, in addition to a company and a supplier, often when items are scarce, there are third-party brokers that get in, and they do their trading and arbitrage, and it's they got their own terms and conditions which have to be managed. So, but yeah, it's so by coming back to the question, having the contracts acknowledging that was a source of work that could be done to make meaningful improvements, targeting that in a way that could generate tangible results, and seeing it through to completion.
Thank you. I love it. Problem solved and new solutions created. So last question here is, let's talk about maybe what's next. If you look at this model and you look at the innovation trajectory and the ecosystem, and who, the size of the organization, small, medium, very large, academia, governments, really these collaborative entities really focusing on heightening innovation and applying it to manufacturing and bringing so many things back here to North America, et cetera. How would you advise organizations and or leaders to harness this for maximum value effect within, say, the next year or two within their organizations?
Well, I'd start with the most receptive ones. I'd start with the ones that are likely going to be the internal champions. And this is, as with any organizational change, you've got different people in the organization. Some are supportive of it, some are very resistant to it. So I'd really want to start with the friendly ones first and get an understanding of where is the most impact that can be made. What is, whether it's the burning platform of what's the biggest problem, or perhaps there's an objective that's been given from top leadership that we want to improve this by 20%, and so get a sense of what is the most important consideration, and then see how this can be applied. I guess using a university as an example, my son attends a university in Canada, and every couple of months he has to select his classes, and it's always a challenge of, does he get the class that he needs, and if he selects it, does he get it, or is he put on a waiting list? And if he gets the classes, or is it conveniently located relative to his other classes in his schedule? So that should not be a roulette wheel. That should be something that, from a program perspective, should, in my opinion, should be more structured to, they've made a commitment that, okay, he's a student in a program, we should give him the sequence of classes that will help him complete that program. So that comes into the user satisfaction delight. Is there a way that he doesn't have to wait until the appointed hour to make his selection? So technological advancements, there are other ways that people can pre-book, pre-select, and then be on their waiting things. So it's, I think practices that are successful in other fields like hotel bookings, for example, you can book a hotel a year in advance and get the room of your choice. Why can't you do that for a class in a university? And then, of course, transactional benefits. Is there a premium? For example, if the university can charge a premium, we'd be willing to pay if something fits the schedule and location. The campus he's in actually has or the university has multiple campuses. So if we can get something where all the classes are co-located in the same campus, that would be worth paying a premium rather than having to commute between two locations, which has time and transportation costs. So giving that option. And this is just coming off the top of my head. So I think to convince the university, first of all, I wouldn't do it myself. I would do it as part of a consensus with the most supportive people, that people who are respected in that organization. So win them over first, and then jointly talk to not just leadership, but also you have to get the resistant ones on side. And you can't do that as an outsider. You have to do that as someone who is partially already accepted by the organization. So, and innovation, it is a fight because there are people who thrive in the status quo, and in fact, the status quo can benefit them. So that is also what has to be overcome.
Well, thank you so much, and we're so very grateful for, again, our awesome speaker, Dan Z. We would like to close our session for tonight and just thank you so much for attending Hitting the iSpot with, again, awesome Dan Z. If you want to engage with us, join us, and support us, you can go to My ASQ Innovation TC. You can find out more about innovation at the ASQE Innovation Insights on Excellence. And and you can join ASQ and ASQE. We'd like to invite you to our next 3 webinar events. Coming up, we have Miss Luciana Paulise on the 27th of January 2023 with How a We Culture Can Drive Innovation. We have Miss Julie Goswami with FinTech Innovation in Banking and Insurance on the 23rd of February. And we have Dr. Kai Yang with Innovation Through the Lens of Quality 4.0 on March 20th, 2023. And last but not least, we would like to wish each of you and your families happy holidays, thank you, and a welcome into 2023. Happy holidays 2022 to all of our members, leaders, and innovation catalysts across the globe. We want to thank our outgoing 2022 officers, our chair, Mr. Larry Miller, and our secretary, Mr. Imran Rana, for all of the phenomenal service that they've offered to our global community. And we want to welcome in our incoming 2023 officers, our new chair, Ms. Rebecca Mott, our chair-elect, Ms. Michelle Vargas, and our secretary, Ms. Jackie Jolly. We thank you for sharing this auspicious 2022 Innovation TC year with each of you, our wonderful speakers and presenters from around the globe. And we wish you a wonderful, happy, safe, healthy, and prosperous holiday season and new year. Thanks again to our awesome speaker, Dan Z, and we will close for this evening and our sessions for 2022. Good night, everyone.